Sandflies and mosquitoes blanketed Maeve's face and neck. She did not bother to brush them away. She'd been in Angren long enough to know more would come in their place.
Your Majesty,
Reynard called from behind.
our scouts have returned. We've a large force of blackclads on our tail, infantry and horsemen, and they draw nearer.
Blast!
Maeve wiped away the sweaty hair stuck to her brow.
What say you, Reynard? Shall we give them a fight?
We're but a few miles from the river where a barge awaits. It makes no sense to battle now.
Though near her strength's end, Maeve stepped up her pace. She could not wait to stand upon a barge deck and leave Angren's infernal bogs behind. Alas, in place of the promised vessel, they found only severed moorings.
No! No, it can't be!
Suddenly, Maeve drove her fist into the trunk of the nearest tree. Fortunately, a soft and rotted one.
This isn't so!
Your Grace, have mercy. I stepped away but for a spell,
Croaked a scout, pale as a ghost.
and thieves jumped out the underbrush. Fell upon it. Whole band of them. A white-haired warrior, a minstrel, and a lass what had a bow.
Well, is that all?
Interrupted Gascon.
No vampire sat upon an ass with no saddle? You're cocked up, man, damn it. Maeve, what now?
The Queen turned back towards the swamp. Between the trees, she glimpsed a golden sun glimmering upon a banner.
We shall discuss that later,
Said the Queen, drawing her sword.
provided we survive.
Near the battle's end, Maeve faced a black-clad officer. Nimbly dodging his strike, she countered. The Queen's sword sank deep, the hilt rattling his breastplate. A rush of hot blood covered Maeve's hands. The winged helmet toppled from the officer's head, exposing a sweaty face, gasping for breath.
When?
Before the Queen stood a ruddy-haired boy with long eyelashes. He was Willem's age, perhaps a bit older. His body slumped, then disappeared beneath the malodorous foam atop the murky waters. Maeve cast away her sword as if it had burned her hand.
Majesty, what is it? Are you hurt?
Reynard said, rushing to her side.
No, I'm not. It's fine. Give the order to march. With no barge, we must walk to Red Lobington along the riverbank.
Your Majesty, we must tend to the wounded. Use the rest of the day, I wager.
We ain't time enough for that.
Interjected Gascon.
That was but the vanguard sent in pursuit to slow us down. And even so, they outnumbered us 2 to 1. What happens when the main force arrives? We must flee. Now.
And abandon the injured, to bleed to death in the mud.
Alas, Reynard, yes. Unless you'd rather we stayed and died with them.
Gascon is right. Should Nilfgaard close the distance between us, we'll stand little chance.
At least you've the sense to...
But I would sooner perish than let my men rot in this accursed swamp. The medics will tend to all the wounded. Then, what will be, will be.
I tell you what'll be.
Snarled Gascon.
Ep die, he'll take a butcher's hook and gut you. Then hang you from Lyria capital's walls. Yet, if this be your wish...
Maeve waited for the medics to sew the last stitch, tie off the last bandage. Only then did she order her force to move out. At the column's end, upon stretchers, lay those without the strength to walk, consumed by fever, dazed or unconscious, dying. Fatigued and laden with the wounded, the Lyrians moved slow as molasses. Soon Nilfgaard's forward elements had caught up. The blackclads nipped at the Lyrian's tail with arrow volleys from the cover of trees and occasional forays by cavalry. They were in no hurry. They could torment their foes, weaken their spirit before the final clash. At long last, Maeve spotted a dark form spanning the river's course, Red Lobington's bridge. Just a brief stretch more, and the Lyrians would find themselves beyond the invaders' grasp, free and clear of bogs, and the beasts that prowled them. Yet joy at this sight soon gave way to despair. The bridge was dark, black, from the horde of Nilfgaardians that held it. Clearly the Blackclads had divined the path of Maeve's flight, and had cut off her last means of escape.
That's it. We're dead men. All. They'll cut us down to the last.
Maeve shut her eyes, felt them sting with fatigue. She knew when she turned she could not show her men 1 ounce of fear, 1 pinch of doubt. She gripped her reins tightly. The leather dug into her skin, helping her hold back her tears. And when the Queen finally spoke, her voice was strong and boomed over the river's roar.
I know what you wish to hear.
The Queen began.
That the gods watch over us. That we'll come through the fray unharmed. That a friendly force is but moments away. Those would be lies. The truth is as bitter as it is undeniable. We stand cornered. Cannot win this fight, cannot flee it. We can but choose how to die. Hanged from the boughs like common criminals, or weapons in hand like the fighters we are. I've made my choice. Time you made yours!
With that cry, Maeve broke for the bridge toward a forest of spears into a deluge of arrows. She let the tears fall from her eyes. Tears of rage, fear, fatigue. It was not until she'd almost reached the enemy line that she dared glance backward, and she saw she was not alone. Maeve was victorious on the banks of the Yaruga, but paid dearly for it. She lost a host of men and suffered harm herself. Yet she'd have been doomed, if not for a certain white-haired witcher. Maeve longed to meet her mysterious savior, and set off in search of him as soon as the battle dust had settled. She found him with the field surgeon and learned he was none other than the Witcher Geralt. Yes, incredible as it may seem, I've heard the tale from several and can vouch for its truth. At any rate, making naught of the fact that Geralt's ears were ringing from a blow with a mace, Maeve began immediately to interrogate him.
You for Woodbridge?
Asked Maeve, prodding him insistently. For a spell, Geralt worried his hearing was shot, but then realized the Queen had a lisp.
Worked out that way, I guess.
You guess?
Maeve gagged on the blood in her mouth.
Someone hold me!
The Queen felt Geralt merited the highest honor, a knighthood. Another monarch might have delayed until a more opportune time, but not Maeve. Maeve delayed nothing.
Count Odo, you, sir, do the honors. Alas, I cannot because of my tooth.
For valor shown in battle, I, Maeve, by the gods' grace, Queen of Lyria and Rivia, hereby do knight thee.
Geralt of place unknown. The bridge you felled with men from Rivia. Or so you guess. I guess it falls to me to dub thee Geralt of Rivia.
Maeve had come home, though by a circuitous route, through Edern's smoking embers, Angren's beast-infested quagmires, cross Mahakam's snow-capped ridges. But she had returned, cloaked in legend, a mighty army in tow. The moment was weighty, and not to be tainted even by Geralt of Rivia's disappearance, or dare we say desertion. The hero of the battle for the bridge was now a sought man. Yet Maeve was determined to take back her realm, with or without the Witcher's aid. The Lyrians' daring escapade behind enemy lines, and the triumphant victory at the battle for the bridge that crowned it, breathed new life into the North's war effort. Bands of resistance fighters now swarmed the conquered lands, while Kedwen and Redania, on the verge of swearing fealty to the Emperor, suddenly broke off talks with the invader. The Nilfgaardian war machine suddenly screeched to a halt, and the tide of war turned. Facing a united North, the invader had to withdraw the bulk of its forces from Lyria and Rivia. The way was cleared for Maeve to retake her lost lands, defeat General Epdahi, and depose Willem. Or perhaps mother and son would not have to fight after all.
Milady, I come at King Willem's bidding.
Prince Willems.
His Majesty proposes a meeting. No arms, no escorts.
His Majesty! Whelp's barely tall enough to reach his mother's bosom! For shame!
Silence. Let him say his piece.
His Majesty, Willem I, wishes to discuss the possibility of a truce.
He wishes to surrender. Is that his aim?
Your words, not mine, Your Grace.
I've a few more on the tip of my tongue. But save them I shall for later.
Willem I's chosen the site for the parley. In...
Willem I will choose nought. If he wishes to speak, let him meet me midst the ruins of Devil's Tower.
Understood, Your Grace. I'll relay your terms.
Willem's emissary rode off, serenaded by hisses and jeers. Frightened by the clamor, his horse reared and kicked. The rider forced his mount to obey with cracks of his crop, striking many more times than was necessary.
The fool. Nag'll toss him off first chance it gets. Soon as he loosens the reins.
No great loss, I wager. But tell me, your thoughts on this reunion?
Sounds a ruse to me. But I know that won't stop you.
Whence this certainty?
Come now, Maeve. At the end of it all, he's your son. You still care about him, it's obvious.
You're absolutely right.
Perhaps let bygones be bygones. Perhaps it's not too late.
Only one way to know. Let's go.
Maeve rode out, clad in golden plate, her banners waving proudly overhead. She no longer led a band of ragtag partisans, but an army able to fend off an empire and drive its soldiers from her lands.
You need my help with anything? Anything at all, I've ideas aplenty.
Long you've travelled, Barnabas. The wonders you must have seen. Likely visited many exotic lands before you reached Mahakam.
Oh, Corvia, yes. Matina, yes. Nazir, doubly. Zericania, gods, yes. And Korath, even. I mean, such beauty there, though hot. Oh, dreadfully so. Horrible place to grow turnips, if you've ever a mind to try. Novigrad. Lived there a spell as well, but I didn't much care for it.
Why ever not?
The hierarch, intractable man, banned one of my inventions, condemned it as unholy, vile, etc., etc. Decided he would burn both of us at the stake. As you can imagine, we had a difference of opinion in that regard.
Perhaps I shall regret this, but do tell. What was the thing you created exactly?
Aha! I knew you'd be interested. You've a curious mind, dear Queen. We're two peas of a feather. Quite the clever contraption it was. Made for a widow, wealthy but aching with longing. In her husband's absence, tormented by unfulfilled needs.
Stop right there. I knew I'd regret asking.
And see, it had this special crank that when rotated...
Barnabas, no, enough.
As you command, Your Majesty. But if you ever get the urge to see it, I've the prototype still tucked away in my trunk.
Noted. But by the gods, please, let's change the subject. Time I attended to other matters.
Ah, yes, you're still here. Off you go, then.
Maeve needed but set one foot into the Ruwode to know something was amiss. The sickening stench of rot hung in the air. Flies swarmed in thick clouds, and crows cawed in a deafening cacophony. What had caused this murder to amass? Well, Maeve's scouts soon found out,
Your Majesty,
reported a certain Sergeant Nadamur.
not far from here, past the bend, there's a cutting and it's full of bodies. Our boys and the Blackclads alike. Bodies mutilated, horribly so, guts ripped open, entrails strewn about, heads lopped. Somewhere, like
Yes?
branches embrace him, grip them tight, as if the trees, they strangled them.
Hearing this, the Queen ordered a halt to their march. They would go no further, she thought, till they knew what had killed those men. Luckily, witnesses were soon found. A haggard band of resin burners emerged from a nearby dugout, black with dirt, covered in dried blood.
My lady,
Their eldest stammered.
Blackins came and started felling the wood. Forced folk to chop away to make way for a town, they said. They pushed hard, right to the heart of the forest where the old oaks grow, and awoke some foulness. The whole camp, blackclads and loggers alike, done in one night. No time even to draw their weapons. We was lucky. Found pits to hide in. Just heard of something huffed and puffed while talking to the trees, no less.
Reynard ordered medics to tend to the Thronebreakers, then turned to Meave.
We cannot wash our hands of this, your grace. The Nilfgaardians awoke the monster, yes, but it kills Rivians just as readily.
Meave stood at the edge of the clearing and pricked her ears. The Ruwode echoed with the cawing of crows, which seemed to perch on its every twig. She also heard the howling of wolves and a hollow rattling, as if branches whipped in the wind, though the day was fair and still.
That Geralt. He just had to desert me.
The Queen removed her cloak to avoid snags and trundled toward the heart of the wood. Her soldiers followed, clutching cocked crossbows to sweaty cheeks. Deep in the wood, it grew cool, with a thin fog filling the air. Meave pushed past a large branch of hazel and froze. Before her stood a tall figure, nearly human in form, save the moss-covered deer skull in place of its head. Empty eye sockets burning with naked flame, the monstrosity hurled itself at Meave with a roar.
Rally to me!
Cried Meave, raising her shield.
Everyone! Anyone, to me!
Attacked from all sides, the monster teetered and swayed, fighting off their blows with ever greater difficulty. Finally, it fell to the ground and fell apart, like an undone bundle of twigs. In disbelief, Meave towed the pile of dried branches and scraps of bark. She saw no blood, no entrails, as if no monster had ever stood there, as if it had all been a dream.
We return to the road.
Meave said, crushing the beast's deer-like skull under her heel.
Ah, and Reynard, I've a request.
Yes, your grace?
Once we regain the realm and return to the capital, remind me to issue an edict. No one is to enter these woods, not to log nor even to gather brush. Just in case.
Those dwelling near the Ruwode heaved a sigh of relief, and the Lyrians returned to fighting an invader who, after what they'd faced in those woods, no longer seemed so frightening. Meave arrived at the walls of Gradobor, famed for fine rugs and woven tapestries. The city's artisans had been at work, no doubt pressed by the Nilfgaardians, for atop the tallest spire, that of the town hall, flapped a lustrous ebony flag, a sun of golden threads at its center. So vast was the banner, Gascon whistled in admiration.
Gotta admit, the Blackclads certainly have panache.
And a vast and powerful army, I'd remind you.
Reynard interjected.
Arbalists line the walls. That stench in the air, hot tar. And our scouts claim the Blackclads stand armed to the hilt with the best Mahakam has to offer. Victory's not likely to come cheap, I fear.
No cost is too high,
said Meave, a hardness in her voice.
Reynard, Gascon, ready our men to attack.
The Lyrians needed no more encouragement. Since arriving, they had reveled in anticipation of taking the city, then ripping the banner from its spire. The battle for Gradobor was a hard fight, though not quite as hard as most had thought it might be. During the assault, at its critical juncture, a blow fell from the blue. The unlikely heroes, merchants and burghers brought together by the city's guilds. A wave of them, all riled, swarmed the Blackclads at the gates and opened them wide to let Lyria in.
Onward! Follow me!
As fighting died down around the city, Meave rode for the town hall on a personal quest. Nilfgaard's vast, garish banner rippled overhead. With its halyard cut, It plunged like a great black bird, stricken. It was the last any would see of the golden sun over Gradobor.
3 cheers! Hip, hip, hooray!
The Lyrians were victorious, though not without aid. Meve met with the merchants who had roused the townsfolk, inspired them to rise up and fight.
Many of my soldiers, dozens, perhaps hundreds, owe you their lives today.
Said the Queen.
For that I am deeply grateful. No, deeply indebted. Should you know a way I might repay the debt, don't for a moment hesitate to ask.
The merchants exchanged glances, nodded, grunted, agreed with each other without uttering a word. Then one, a clothfuller, his moustache most robust, stepped forth, bowed low, and spoke for them all.
Your Majesty, the invaders brought laws. Laws what don't agree with customs we've long held. Non-humans they forced us to accept. Let them join our guilds, sit on the city council. It's right ridiculous it is. These treacherous dwarves, why, they've been on their side from the start, so it's no wonder. But, well, the Nilfgaardian reforms, we'd like you to revoke them. Non-humans must know their place.
An awkward silence ensued. All turned their eyes to the Queen, awaiting her response.
Your city,
Meve began slowly after a pause.
your rules. So be it. I hereby strike down all Nilfgaard's reforms.
The townsmen grasped each other's shoulders and vigorously shook hands, toothy grins spreading upon all their faces. Yet when they asked the Queen to stay and feast, she politely but firmly declined. Her army left Gradobor that very day. She rode at its fore, angry and silent.
I know.
Meve finally blurted to Reynard, her eyes still facing forward.
I know I granted a wicked request. But I can't hope to easily end hate, distrust, wipe away years of bloodshed. Not with one decree. To force those tradesmen to accept non-humans, allow them into their guilds, would have changed nothing. Do you understand, Reynard?
Alas, she could not tell, for Reynard held his tongue. As the Lyrians passed a cemetery marching along its ivy-covered wall, they heard mourners wailing pitifully to a priestess's moving song. The soldiers dutifully lowered their heads. Their minds sought out fallen comrades and kin, and they wondered whom else the war would yet claim.
Listen,
Said Gascon, stirring Meve from her own meditation.
I think I'll veer off for a bit.
What for? To offer your condolences?
In a manner of speaking. But just go on. I'll rejoin you soon.
Meve nodded in agreement, then made as if to ride on. Yet Gascon had hardly entered the cemetery when the Queen turned and followed. Gascon quickly realized he was not alone.
Oh, Meve. Had I been plotting to do you no good, I'd not have announced I was sneaking off to do it.
What do you mean?
Come now, Meve, don't play the fool. You don't trust me, so you followed. Probably thought I'd commune with Epdahi in some crypt. Nay, better, the conclave of mages. Well, rest assured then. For if I truly had something I wanted to conceal, I dare say you'd not have noticed me slip off.
I was merely curious to see what you would do here.
Ah, indeed. It is rather curious what folk do in cemeteries. Play tiddlywinks, perhaps? Or take in the sun?
Gascon, I've grown used to you bending the rules of decorum, but now you overstep, sir. You overstep.
Oh, will you have me flogged?
Hold your tongue, sir, or I shall indeed. Splendid. Now tell me why you've come here.
If you absolutely must know, then follow me.
Gascon led Meve through the ruins of a mausoleum, past its decapitated statues, past ancient gravestones effaced, past sarcophagi smashed to pieces.
Whose is it? Could it be...
Yes, Maeve. My family's vault. The Brossards.
the Brossards? Wait. The Brossards?
The very same. Traitors who in 1258 revolted against King Reginald, your late husband. The earth lie lightly upon him. An error, most certainly. We paid dearly for it. Reginald had no mercy, decimated the family. As you can see, didn't even spare the dead. I was outside, away from the house. 'Tis the only reason I survived. Was 8 at the time, stripped of title and home. Well, I'm sure you can guess the rest. Frankly, do my damnedest not to think on it. But the wall, the cemetery, seeing them awoke all the old demons.
Your crest. I seem to recall a pointer. The Duke of Dogs. Now I understand. The Brossards' trial I remember well. Reginald was angry. He prodded and pushed. Too far. The sentence was cruel, spiteful. I felt it all, but said nothing. I'm so very, very sorry, Gascon.
Water under the bridge. And the past's a thing none of us can change.
The past, no. But the present? I could rebuild your family's tomb. All deserve to rest in peace.
Maeve, the war nears its end days now, and you'll have more urgent expenses.
So I shall pay for this now. I'm grateful, Gascon, and indebted, vastly. Let me do this. Let me pay my debt in part, at least.
I thank you.
Gascon remained silent the rest of the day. When the force halted for the night, he sat secluded in his tent. But by the morn, he was his witty, mirthful self again. His family's final resting place would be returned to its former glory. This he knew, and it seemed to lift a weight from his mind. He could now reconcile with his family's tragic past.
Maeve, I must say it again, I'm sorry. And I thank you for forgiving me.
No need to say any more, Gascon.
But you've got to know.
Every time you bring it up, I'm tempted to change my mind. Now let's turn to the task at hand. Listen, I'd wish to speak again of...
Wait, I know what of, and you know it's a topic I'd rather not dwell on.
It won't help to let those thoughts fester.
And what would help? Barring a magical leap into the past, of course. Maeve, believe me, I've shed tears enough for my family. I've no need to think of it. No need to speak of it. And certainly not with you.
It's time I attended to other matters. Farewell.
Your Grace, I wished once more to express my gratitude for your show of mercy.
I showed mercy, true, but felt much more. Anger, pain, now resentment. You hurt me, Reynard. Wounded me to the bloody core. I don't know what else to say on the matter, so let's not speak of it.
As you wish, Your Grace.
The Queen had chosen to meet Willem at Devil's Tower, and not without purpose. The structure stood on an isle, so no foe could approach without first exposing themselves on a narrow bridge. The isle had little vegetation midst which to conceal a large force. A small unit could evade detection. Altogether not much to fear.
No escorts were your terms.
Began Gascon, with a hint of mischief.
But better safe than sorry, I always say.
What are you suggesting?
Yours truly, and 4 chaps, behind the walls. Give a signal, any signal, and we'll leap to your side.
Maeve struggled with her conscience. There was no honor in Gascon's plan, but prudence, certainly. In the end, she nodded in agreement, though not without compunction. Willem arrived soon after, the heavily armored cavalry he had in tow clearly there to boost his courage. He left them at the foot of the bridge and rode across alone. A stiff wind from the river nearly made off with his ermine fur cloak. Willem, and the mother who'd borne him stood face to face. They gazed into each other's eyes, waiting to see who would look away first. When neither did, Meve broke the silence.
Time flies, and I've a kingdom to liberate. No need to drag this out. What's this about? Tell me.
I thought my messenger already did.
Oh, he did. And how? Willem I wishes to arrange a truce. Only, Willem I is in no position to parley on an equal footing. Willem I can, at most, offer his unconditional surrender, because Willem I's losing this war.
Yes, Mother, I am. And I see that by losing I've at last made you content.
Don't play the victim. What next? Will you say you turned cloak because Mummy showed no warmth, displayed no feelings?
'Twould be unfair, any such judgment. You did show feelings, chiefly enmity, contempt. But that's not why I betrayed you. No, I simply disagreed with your choices, assessments.
I had every right to do what I considered just and good.
And I had every right to voice my view, which you ever ignored. Yet this is neither the time nor the place to discuss that. Let us parley as strangers. I'm losing, you say. And you're right. But I haven't lost yet, and have no intention to surrender. I am ready, however, to renounce my fealty to the Empire and pledge my forces to you. As long as you fulfill my conditions.
Let me hear them.
First, you will not rescind the reforms I've authorized already, any of them. Second, you will guarantee both my safety and that of my advisors. Third, I shall remain your heir, and next in line for the throne.
These terms I cannot accept.
Well, I had to try, Mother.
Yet I can't deny your courage either. Come here. Look me in the eye. This couldn't have been easy.
No, it wasn't.
I trust when the time comes, you'll show the same nerve on the battlefield.
I shall seek out your banner. Let the gods then settle our dispute once and for all. Goodbye, Mother.
Willem bowed, turned, and walked away. Meve's anger burned still in her gut, beneath a heart now heavy with grief. Soon thereafter, Meve's army set out towards Rivia Castle. It would not be long now before the decisive battle.
Your Grace,
Said Reynard, saluting and clicking his heels.
peasants from the Scala region have arrived at camp. Supplicants, wishing to deliver a plea to your person.
Meve sighed. Supplicants, trials, audiences, all aspects of queendom she did not miss.
Very well, bring them here,
She replied.
and instruct them to be brief, with no digressions.
The band of commoners was led by a sturdily built beekeeper dubbed Ethelred, son of Theobald. Finding himself in the Queen's presence, he fell to his knees and waved his arms in his best impression of proper etiquette.
Oh, my lady the Queen, your gracious mightiness, take pity on us tillers and toilers. War's all around, leaving us but scraps to live off, and barely that, to be honest. So we beg you, don't do it. Don't raise the levies. We can't pay more than...
What?
Meve interrupted.
What the devils are you talking about?
What? Your decree. One they nailed to our notice board.
The peasant said, sheepishly pulling out a parchment and pointing to the relevant paragraph with his rough finger.
We, Queen Meve, do hereby proclaim that if our throne we shall recover, the tallage, murage, and pavage we shall raise threefold. The expenses of this war for to compensate at the cost of the common folk.
Meve and Reynard exchanged astonished glances. They had issued no such decree. Yet the document bore her signature and seal.
Perhaps it was Willem's doing.
Impossible.
Meve said firmly.
My son sank low, but not so low as to forge my name.
Then who fabricated this decree?
The Nilfgaardians.
The Queen replied without hesitation.
They have access to my seal, to my scribes. They wish to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt, turn my folk against me. And they are liars without any honor.
The Queen tore the falsified document to shreds. Knowing this would solve nothing, she had to find the printers churning out these fakeries. and end their run.
Oi, Meavy!
Cried Gascon, as usual paying no heed to courtly etiquette.
Come here a minute.
Would it hurt so terribly to occasionally address me by Your Grace or Your Majesty?
Didn't want to be petty, but since you bring it up, you've never once addressed me as the Duke of Dogs.
Meave sighed, rolling her eyes.
Get on with it.
My lads jumped one of the Blackclads' transports. Guess what they were hauling?
Gascon handed Meave a pot filled to the brim with a thick, dark fluid.
Paint?
Close. Printer's ink. Same tone used in those phony decrees.
Meave spun on her heel, put a hand to her mouth, and yelled,
Reynard! Send scouts to comb the area!
Her soldiers returned a few hours later with good news. They were able to find a Nilfgaardian printer's workshop hidden in an abandoned barn. It was guarded by a division of elite infantry.
Right. So?
Gascon thumbed the edge of his blade.
Shall we stop the presses?
Time for the Nilfgaardians to publish a retraction.
Spoke the Queen as she drew her sword.
Signed with their own blood. Follow me!
The Lyrians did not need to be told twice. Their Queen's honor, her good name, that was a cause well worth fighting for. The Nilfgaardians fought fiercely, led by a seasoned covert agent. Seeing he would soon fall into enemy hands, he put a knife to his throat and, in a quick slash, sent blood pouring over paper and still wet ink. Reynard leapt towards him, trying to stanch the red tide. But it was too late, and the spy's secrets perished with his last gargled breath. Meave picked up a freshly printed pamphlet. The document listed her many crimes and misdeeds, the true and the manufactured alike. Above the main body of the text, an etching depicted her, well, in a very unflattering manner.
How about a taste of their own medicine?
Asked Gascon, piecing blocks of type into a scathingly foul phrase.
Me and the lads will scratch out a couplet about Ep Dahi, spread it around the countryside, give the folk a hearty laugh at those tossers' expense.
War should be fought by the sword,
said Meave.
not by lies and slander. Remember, Gascon, we cannot stoop to their level.
The Queen commanded her Lyrians to destroy the presses. Soon, reams of paper went up in flames, and cracked blocks of type were trampled into the ink-stained mud. The traitorous Caldwell family's residence loomed into view. Against the horizon, it looked suitably sinister. Yet the manor had changed since Meave last saw it. 2 new wings, ornate towers, a grand colonnade. And the windows now glistened with stained glass, the gilded hue of imperial suns.
We must pay them a visit.
Seethed the Queen. The great double doors opened with an echoing thud. Just inside them stood the heir to the estate, Dragomir, his wife and 3 children by his side, and Helena, the treacherous Count's widow. Sliding the cap from his head, thus giving proof of the family's hereditary baldness, Dragomir knelt down upon one knee.
Your Grace, my father's betrayal stands beyond doubt and exoneration.
The young Caldwell said flawlessly, and in a single breath, as if he'd practiced a dozen times.
And his death at your hands was most well deserved. I ask that ye not punish sons for the sins of their fathers. I ask humbly, with bowed head, allow me to stay on my ancestral lands, to serve faithfully as your loyal subject.
I believe not a word slithering out of his mouth,
whispered Reynard.
The first chance he gets to stab you in the back, he will take.
Convenient to make this request now, don't you think? Why not earlier?
Meave asked, crossing her arms and raising her chin.
It would have behooved you to send a messenger, once I'd crossed into Rivia.
Preferred to speak to you directly, Your Grace, For
you held out hope. Hope that the Blackclads would yet defeat me. You stood on their side till the last. No. The Caldwells I trusted once, but I shan't make that error again. You've one day to pack your chattels and go. Leave my country.
Dragomir rose from his knee and shook out the cap he'd crushed in supplication.
Only ever as a corpse, Your Majesty.
He hissed, his vulnerable demeanor gone in a flash.
If you'll not take me for your vassal, You must take me as your foe. Men, to arms!
At this sign, armed men rushed from the house while archers appeared atop the roof. Clearly, Dragomir had expected to be refused. Dragomir lay in the courtyard of his extravagant manor. With the last of his strength, he clawed at the colored gravel. He resembled an insect that was hurt, damaged, yet pulled itself along as if it could somehow escape death. The Queen knelt beside him and gazed into his clouded eyes.
I want you to know your family will be looked after. You've relatives in Kedwen. They'll be sent there, properly escorted, with the proper stipend.
Dragomir wished to say something, but choked on his own blood. He was dead a moment later. The Queen slowly stood and gave the order to march. She rode at the front of the column, deep in thought.